Okay, so the previous discussions we talked about smart cane. So let me sort of broaden the discussion and take you to both assistive technology in a broader sense, and also talk about how does the activities of the lab get focused. So one of the things that I talked earlier also in case of the smart cane was we benefited extensively being working closely with the users. And I also mentioned that many times even the challenges that are there are quite different in different geographies. So the other device that we have been now working, and I will tell you the status of that, is a device which helps visually impaired to board public buses. So if somebody has to say, so it's a very important part of mobility, like that is the lowest cost transportation available in all cities. So if you are not able to take a public bus, you will not be able to go to school, you will not be able to go to work. So so all of that education, vocation, everything is facilitated by your being able to take a bus. So normally if you look upon it, if you were to sit down and think, how can I make a public bus accessible? One thing that comes out very clearly is route number. How does a visually impaired person know which route number the bus is taking? Okay. Especially if you look at a stand in Delhi, you will see 50, 60, 70 route numbers coming on to the same stop. So that is a challenge. But if you talk to a visually impaired, and please remember, as of today, very few visually impaired people in this country use a public bus. They are just not accessible. Okay. There are very few, and you have to reach out to them because they can only tell you what the problem is. Somebody who has never used a public bus because he has always been told that they are not for you. So you can't obviously ask the question what bothers you. But once we started on this project, we managed to talk to a few. We occasionally take public bus, sometimes with sighted help, sometimes without sighted help. So what was told to us was route number is a difficult problem for them. They have to always ask a co-passenger, and because they want to avoid crowds, they normally, the people who are users of it, they take in early morning. They come, try to avoid crowded hours, and if they are taking from a stop which is not very popular, they may not have co-passenger. So they won't even know what the route number is. But they say a bigger challenge for us is finding out where the door of the bus is. Entry door is a bigger challenge than the route number itself. The challenge is, so if you look at those of you who have travelled in Europe, the bus will always come and stop in a bay. There is a bus bay and the bus will stop, and if there is another bus waiting, that will also wait for this bus to go, or maybe at most two buses may stop one after the other, but there is a bay is a very defined part of the stop, almost on all bus stops. But in our country, even if there is a bus stop, most of the time the bus will not be able to reach the bay of the bus because of slow moving vehicles, because of crowd at the stop or whatever it is. It may stop on the second lane and it may stop in a distance of 20 to 25 meters. Then we actually did measurements, and we need 20 to 25 meters of area is actually the bay. And it extends not only to the first lane, it also extends to the second lane. And this part of the journey is the most risky journey for a visually impaired. Even if a co-passenger tells him or her that your bus has come, but because the door is not known, which direction he will move, and with the cane. And please remember, this is also the point that most of the people are also rushing towards the bus, and sometimes there may be a two-wheeler which may still overtake on the wrong side. Okay. So still you are sort of so this is the most unsafe part of the journey, is getting onto the bus even though you may know what so the challenge was actually posed to us in this manner, that we have to not only give them what the route number is, if you want to make them mobile, make them accessible, we also tell them where the door is. It is a completely innovative solution. Such a solution does not exist globally anywhere, because the problem does not exist in the developed countries. You will solve a problem only when you encounter it, The problem itself does not exist, because if it stops in a bay, this is not a challenge. For example, even in Delhi metro it is not a challenge for a visually impaired, because the metro stops exactly at this, and those of you who have noticed the tiles on the Delhi metro is the most friendly blind transport in the country. Of course, the crowd is a big challenge, that is, but if you avoid the peak hours, it is because they put the tiles, they directs you, and it directs you exactly to the door of the metro, and you can see the metro coming. So, we looked at the problem and tried to find a solution. So, our solution that we have is we have a RF transponder. So, there is a small handheld device which actually queries all the buses in the neighborhood. There is a device on the bus, all these devices respond. We have a small slotted network protocol, just like so all the multiple buses are responding. We can handle 8 to 10 buses being present at the stop at the same time maximum. All these buses respond through RF. This device picks up and reads out the information, route numbers one by one, local device. If the route number is of interest to the user, he or she will press the select button. There are only two buttons, the device is very simple to operate, query button and select button. If you press the select button, then there is a speaker which is fitted next to the door of the bus, which starts speaking out the number, and that becomes the audio cue. The bus gets detected 40 meters away from the around 40 meters range. Even so, the whole transaction gets triggered by user hears a bus coming, presses the query button, gets the route number. If the bus is of interest, then he presses the select button, and then the speaker actually speaks the number. Even if the bus is moving, by the audio he knows that the bus is still not come to the stop, and any time in the process he can press the select button again. Each time he press the select button, it speaks out the number again through the speaker. So, many things in it. If there is no visually impaired person standing on the, you do not create any additional noise, because the whole thing. If the route number is of not interest to you, you do not create any additional noise. So, it is not like a person standing there and saying 545, 545, We have seen those of us who have lived long in Delhi, we know that we had these mini buses where there always a person who was there to collect passengers, and he will keep on saying Kashmiri Gate, Kashmiri Gate, So, that's not the process here. Process is a process when audio sound comes from the speakers only when there is a user who wants to board that particular bus. That is the model that we have used. This device we fabricated, tested on what are called these orange cluster buses in Delhi for some time. The many challenges in Delhi, then finally we got permission to do a larger installation in Mumbai. We installed it last year 2015, first half of 2015 we installed it on 25 buses in Mumbai. 21 users was given the device. Initially they were given some training, somebody else went with them, but these users were actually people who were actually taking the buses. They were bus users. So, we did not want to take a risk with people who are not using the buses. And then they were asked to do 3 unsupervised boardings. That means, after they had some supervised boarding, that means they were just asked that okay, you go to this particular stop by yourself, board the bus, get down at this stop, note down the time when you reached the stop, when you boarded the bus, when you got down. Very interesting results. So, 350 unsupervised boardings successfully done. 92% of the time they were able to board the first bus on the route, on that particular route. Two routes in Bombay were covered, like in the sense those two routes had, one had some 14 buses, another had 11 buses. We put it on all the 25 buses on that route. Even among the 8% where they missed, we cannot really establish that all of them got missed because of the device, because of the fact that the Mumbai or most bus companies would also do some dynamic rerouting during the day. They may actually put another bus on the route because of some reason, okay, or they change the bus from one route to another because there is some issue with a bus on another route. So, we were not able to establish that all of them actually got missed whether the user has the device. Very successful. Mumbai corporation is very happy, BEST is very happy with the device, and we have a letter from them that they would like to have it on all their 4,000 plus buses. in Mumbai. So, the Mumbai city wants to become fully accessible with this device. We are struggling to raise funds. Okay. So, because they do not have the funds, they are ready to technically support us, in the sense they will maintain the device and they will make it accessible, but somebody else, because the buses are loss making entities, and So, we are at this point in time accessing CSR and people, companies, as well as people who would like to fund the project in Mumbai. Kerala, there is an interest, similar interest, again funding is an issue. We have done the know-how transfer, we have a company which will produce it and maintain it, but the stage of the project is that and it is a unique solution globally. Okay. So, there is no such solution exists for boarding of public buses. But this space has also very interesting outcomes. So, one of the very interesting things, after we conducted the trial, we took an appointment with the general manager of BEST, who is the highest operating officer in BEST, to just report to him what happened and so on. So, his observation was he gave us this, finally he gave us this letter saying that yes, we would like to have it on all our buses, because that is a very important letter for us. But before that, his observation was very interesting. He said that you have conducted all these trials, you come from IIT, so we believe you that you are saying so many times they boarded. But he says, for me the most important thing was, I got a feedback from the ground that my drivers were waiting for the blind people to get onto the bus, because your device actually speaks the number, it puts a public pressure. Everybody in the public knows that there is a visually impaired person who wants to actually board the buses. There was sensitivity that was raised for the driver as well as for the conductor, that there is a person wants to board, and they were actually waiting, and this feedback is very important for me. He says there is no way I could have generated this by myself. Of course, it was completely not, this was not the design objective. We were just trying to solve a technical problem, but social objective that it solves is completely different. So, he says just because of that I am ready to install it on all our buses. The fact that it speaks, it will the person will wait. So, it has also a very an interesting, so there are some technology limitations we did not anticipate. Sometimes the visually impaired person, most of these persons would actually know which direction the bus is coming. So, they will press the query button only when the bus is coming in the direction they are waiting. At some places the stops are just opposite to each other, the road is not too wide, the stop is opposite to each other, and he or she by mistake presses the query button when the bus is actually going in the opposite direction, that bus will start speaking. We did not have a directional antennas, and this driver will keep on waiting that some visually impaired person is wanting to board the bus. So, he reported back that sometimes he waited, but nobody boarded the bus. Then we realized that it is a design flaw, because we are not direction sensitive, because the route numbers unfortunately, unlike trains where the train numbers are actually different, one direction other direction, buses we never use different numbers, the number is the same. We only know implicitly, we know which direction we have to board, whether we have to board on this, going this way or that way. So, now we had to redesign it, we are now directional antenna, so that it response actually does not come, but this actually came from the drivers who actually waited for passengers who did not exist, because this guy realized at some point this bus is going, he obviously will not cross the road to board the bus, but mistake pressed the query button, hearing a bus coming, not realizing that. Of course, typically visually impaired persons have very good sense of direction, but such mistakes could happen. So, now our redesign actually takes care of this to a great extent. Okay. Anyway, so this was, I was talking about being with the users to understand what their needs are is fundamental, and we have gone into mode, and today we are very fortunate that we have two blind people working in the lab. They belong to another organization, our partner organization, but because we are doing a lot of these joint projects, so with an arrangement we actually house them in the lab. So, this gives a very interesting perspective to not only the fact that we have now users who can, we can at least get some ready feedback. 2 is not a big number, you can't do any design based on feedback from 2 people, and also these 2, one boy and one girl, both of them are technically very savvy. So, we do need to get a common man's feedback, because but still the fact that they are in the lab helps us. Students can directly go and approach them, we do not have to set up an appointment and go outside. But very interestingly, having them in a lab brings in another factor which is very important. It is not that one has to look at people with different abilities. I will call them different abilities. That is not only politically correct, I believe that is the correct word. One of these persons working in the lab is a person called Sunil. He travels long distance. He actually comes every day from Mathura. You will not believe a person travels from Mathura, a blind person, takes a train, takes a bus, sometimes an auto, and then comes to the lab every day, and he is there at 9 o'clock. Do not ask me when does he start from Mathura to come to the lab. Either he can't afford to rent a place nearby, so he has to travel, his family lives there, and he comes. If the lab is open and lights are not on, that means Sunil has reached and he is working, because he does not have to switch on the lights. He comes, he opens his laptop and starts working. Only when the lights are on, that means somebody else came before Sunil. If Sunil came first, then no. So, if the power goes off, it does not bother him at all, as long as his laptop batteries are charged and working. So, whose abilities we should question? Our abilities, who need the power, or his abilities who does not need the power other than. So, there are many such things that we see when we work with them, that we actually start a certain respect, not just pity, not just compassion, but a certain respect that yes, there are many things they are able to do, which we normally think they will not be able to do. So, just the first time when I started this, I told you about this Emacs editor. This person came and asked me about this some 17-18 years back. So, my first reaction was, do not you need something for the keyboard? How do you type? And his reaction was very simple, because you can see you type slowly. I can't see, I type very fast. And he says, have you ever seen a typist looking at the keys to type? So, the keyboard is actually designed not for seeing. Positions are fixed, and there is also a bubble on certain central characters, and those bubbles are the reference points. We may not even notice the bubble, but those bubbles are very important for them to get aligned to it. So, the challenge for the visually impaired came only when they switched from QWERTY keyboard on mobiles to smartphones. So, initially the smartphones were not smart enough for them, they were only smart for us, not for them, but increasingly smartphones have, all of them have put in lot of features which are accessibility features, both on iOS of course was very fast, Android is also now more or less has become accessible. So, the issue is there are lots of such things once they start interacting, and in many things that which we take for granted, which we sort of do not realize, but they are actually can do things, and what they can do is also very important to know when you design solutions. It is not just what they cannot do, okay, because what they cannot do is one thing, but they can do, and sometimes they can do things much better than what they can, because clearly those of you work in all this brain research and so on so forth, it all depends upon what parts of your brain are well developed, and clearly there are many other sensory perceptions that they have are extremely well developed compared to us. So, that is one aspect, which is a sort of a user focused research. How do we do it? Second thing I want to talk a little bit about is science. When we teach science and when we learn science, when we actually go through our education, we tend to get very narrow focused, and more the levels of education. School, we do not have separate books for physics and chemistry, we just have science books. Then once you graduate, then depending on what subject you choose, even if you choose a science subject, you will say okay, mathematics, physics, chemistry. biology, of course similarly in engineering. And we keep on going, getting more and more specialized. We do an M.Tech, we get more specialized, and we do a PhD, we get even more specialized. Now the challenge is, as soon as you talk about any innovation and product, you need to de-specialize. Is such that which can be solved with very narrow boundaries of a discipline. You can do research, you can do publish papers, but if you want to solve actual real life problems, you need to de-specialize. And once we started working on this problem, slowly we realized that collaborations are extremely important. You already have an unfortunate, like people like us who already done a PhD and have a baggage of so many years of doing research in a specialized area. So we tend to think we only know this. We do not know other things, and we are very, comfort zone is very low in getting out of that and talking to that. But in the last 10 years of working on this particular inhibition has gone. We look at the problem and then look for collaborators, and being in a place like IIT is helpful. You have people of various disciplines, and you have to talk to them, you have to motivate them, and you have to take. Similarly, when it comes to students, there is the same challenge. The students also comes with some education, undergraduate or masters, if they were wanting to do a PhD, or even if you employ somebody on your project to do work, they have some degree and it needs to. So environments which are interdisciplinary is very important. So putting people under the same roof. So today the lab has electrical engineer, computer science, a design person, the mechanical engineer, all these students work in the same lab. Over a period they understand each other's lingo, they understand the term and become somewhat familiar or at least comfortable in dealing with interdisciplinary groups. Companies do it, especially small companies which tackle product design, but we need to do same in research and innovation and research if we need to actually go towards products. I will tell you one project that we are doing, because this will also link to the other question that was there about startups. So when we are doing this smart cane, so we said we also should have a self learning manual. We give a device, they should be able to, so there should be a manual which a blind person can read by himself or herself. Many of you would know about Braille. The Braille is a way that the text can be expressed. So Braille is actually a script, it is not a language, and more than 150 languages in the world have actually used the Braille script. Perhaps the most popular script, invented by a blind person 150 years back, and it is basically, if you really look upon it, it is nothing but binary coding. It uses 6 dots, and whether the dot is like whether it is pressed or not, of course the tactile feedback, but it can 64 characters can be represented using 6 dots with 2 raised to power 6 combinations, and that is the basic principle that is used for doing mapping a language to Braille. So all of this was invented by a blind person. So you can see that the type of vision the person has, though he may not be sighted. Okay. So the vision and sight are completely orthogonal to each other. So something which has survived for 150 years, used by so many languages, no other script has actually penetrated so many languages. So that is one. So the Braille was okay. So we said okay, we were already in touch with a lot of organizations who can do Braille typing, Braille printing and so on. So the Braille part. So our student said, no, sir, we also have to explain how the ultrasonic ranging works, otherwise they will not get a feel of how does this device works. So there are standard diagrams, transmitted wave, reflected wave, any physics book will have this. But the problem essentially was, how do I draw this diagram? Then we went around and we found okay, there are this tactile diagram that is possible. The situation we saw in terms of, and in this process, because we were also working with Wellcome Trust, we had opportunity to go to London few times, we were in touch with RNIB, Royal National Institute of Blind, which is one of the most advanced blind organizations in the world, which supports all the blind students or people in UK. We saw wonderful books, tactile books that they produce for, not today, not yesterday, for last 30-40 years they have been doing these tactile books, that were present, and this was something completely absent in this country. So, you would be completely shocked if I tell you the way that today the blind student has to learn is the same book that we learn in school, the same book, pictures are removed, text part is printed in braille and given to them to study. This is the state of the technology and state of the society today. References to figure exist, it will say figure 3.2 in the text part, but there will be no figure, and that person is supposed to read that book and compete and write the same examination as what a sighted child is to write. That is the state, and whereas is completely different in Europe. There are books available, and US, Europe, Japan, all these three are extremely advanced, and they have been producing tactile diagrams. But the challenge again was of affordability. Each diagram in their book roughly translates to $2 per page. That is the technology they use. They use a technology called swell paper. It is a beautiful technology. You print on a laser printer, put it through a heater, it swells wherever it is. Carbon gets deposited through the laser printer on the diagram. So, the diagram actually swells up, borders swell up, and then you can touch and feel. Of course, same diagram, if you print it exactly the same way, it is not useful. Some modifications are necessary unless the diagram is very simple, but those are guidelines exist, and those guidelines, using those guidelines. So, in India the tactile diagrams have existed, but the tactile diagrams are not part of production process. Various schools will produce, or various organizations which are doing education will have a library of these diagrams. They will have self produced diagrams, and so they may, depending on what the enterprise of that particular school or the teacher is, he will have some diagrams and he will show to the students, can use it when they are. Book comes only with braille. Diagrams are, if the school produces them and uses them, well and good, but it is not. This was not embedded systems, not my domain, but we thought this is a pressing problem we need to address, and we can. Of course, as I said, being in a place like IIT, so I started collaborating with a professor who works in image processing. So, now we have a center of excellence in tactile diagrams, and I will show you some books which we have produced. This is a book which contains, let us say this is a book which is an NCERT book, which is on maps, the tactile map book which we have produced, and these are at a price of less than a tenth of the price of diagrams. I would say 1/8 of the price of the diagram set. We would like to go to 1/10, and our production process we are still working on. Production process is involved. There is we are now going to release a software which can actually take a standard diagram, at least simple diagrams, and semi automatically convert them into a form which can actually be used by the visually impaired person. There is a software part, there is of course a design part which is reading those guidelines. So, we are still using the guidelines which have been produced. 3 to 4 years we are hoping to produce our own Indian guidelines which are more technologically suitable, because these guidelines were written many years back when the image processing technology was not developed. So, they do not use that very much in those guidelines. They only go from the what the user can perceive, simplicity and so on. So, today we have working on the whole set of solutions, working very closely with NCERT, and we are now produced 9th grade science and maths books which are, as of today, this particular session, something like 25 children in 6 different schools, blind children in 6 schools are today using it, and by February, March we will have a full feedback on what impact they had in their actually learning, okay, in terms of, because first time they are getting a textbook which has actually all the figures of the 9th grade science and maths book which sighted children are using. Going back to the question that you had in terms of startup, this is an area where we think we should be able to do a startup. Still there are challenges of government being a primary, but fortunately it is not one government, it is so many state governments, everybody has textbooks and everybody. So, it is a fairly distributed. We need is very high, thousands of books need to be converted, because if schemes like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has to have any meaning, that means every blind child has to have books, and books have pictures. And actually if you look at it over the years, when we were children, when we were in school they had fewer pictures, but I am sure when you were in school they had a lot more pictures, because today everything is becoming more and more visual. Okay. So, so there is a need to convert these books into tactile. So, that is a place where we are hoping to get an incubation done very soon, because this is an area which is huge in terms of work needs to be done, and it has to be a BPO type operation, hundreds of tactile designers who are actually converting these diagrams into this, and so that we can actually produce books. But we have now an end to end solution, we have shown that it can be done, we are doing it, we have at least 4, 5, 6 books already done, which users are got a very good feedback. Like for example, NCERT would like to have 5,000 copies of this book, but we can't produce it. So, we are saying that let us wait for the incubation to come, because IIT is not a place where we can start doing mass production of books. So, this is another aspect. Interdisciplinarity is very key, user focus is key, and there are areas where startups are key, because we need young people who would actually be able to devote their sort of focus it, so that create the whole challenge. And this is also a place where we think we can even be a good exporter of know-how, in the sense that just like publishing, if a lot of publishing has come to India, because it is more affordable to do editing and so on and so forth. Whether it is Elsevier or whether it is Springer, they are working with large number of organizations, especially in southern part, but also something in Gurgaon in terms of publishing. So, this is also exactly like publishing, you need the designers, you need the people who will convert these diagrams and produce it. So, we have even actually Sweden, the people who have shown interest that yes, if you would like to do this, we can look for working with you in terms of production. So, this is another place that I think things can be changed, and we can work out a good startup and incubation done. Maybe that is where I will stop and go for question and answer.